Welcome to Class Act Coaching, a podcast for teachers and instructional coaches. This show is brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. At SREB, we believe every one of you deserves a coach. Whether you're inspiring students or guiding teachers, let our school improvement team be your coach this week. Hi, everyone. It's Ashley. Welcome back to another episode of Class Act Coaching. This is actually, we're going to make an announcement, I think later this week on this, but we're rebranding and we're going to change the name of the episode. So this is actually, other than our announcement episode, this is technically the last episode of Class Act Coaching, the podcast. We will still be continuing just with a new name, but that's a big deal. So I just want to mention that make sure you listen to that announcement where we talk about all the changes. They're very exciting. I'm super excited. So welcome to the last episode of Class Act Coaching and the last episode of season 1 of the SREB podcast. So we've been talking to Leslie Eaves, SREB's director of project-based learning, and we've been talking about the report that she and her subcommittee of the AI and Education Commission created on guidance for using AI in the K12 classroom. So this report is based around 4 pillars of AI usage in the classroom. In our first episode, we just did an introduction to the topic. Then we've broken down each of the pillars. So our second week, we talked about pillar 1, which is creating tasks that are cognitively demanding. And then in the third episode, we talked about pillar 2, which is streamlining teacher work and planning time through AI. And then last week, we talked about pillar 3, which is personalizing learning with AI. And so today we're going to talk about pillar 4. Before I talk about what that is, I'm just going to say, go listen to all our other episodes and also get the free report. You can download it. You don't have to sign any forms. You just get the report and figure out how to use it in your classroom. So today we're going to talk about pillar 4, which is ethical and proficient student use of AI. And for that, we're going to bring Leslie back in. I'm going to kick it over to our interview. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, Ashley, how are you?
My intros to these are getting much longer because we've talked so much now. I have to cover so much. It feels like that game where you go around and everybody says like, oh, I'm Ashley and I like airplanes.
Yeah.
You have to remember everybody.
Right. Yeah.
But we're almost done. You've got 2 more weeks with me, and then we'll be done with our 6 episodes in this series. Next week, we're going to talk about the checklist that you created. And so thank you again for sitting down with me so much over the last couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Not a problem. So today we're going to talk about pillar 4. Can you explain what pillar 4 is and how you came up with it?
Well, again, remember, it wasn't just me. It was our subcommittee based on the research that we've done. I want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due. These pillars came out of the work of our K12 instruction subcommittee as part of the AI in Education Commission. And so it is not Leslie Eaves' work. It is the collective work of lots of brains and research of looking at.
I will say sometimes I've given you all the credit and not enough to the other people involved. This time I did mean you as the collective you, not a singular you. But I'm glad you made that clear because not everybody could read my mind and know that's how I meant it. So I'm glad.
I just want to make sure we're giving back to that because they were definitely instrumental in being able to help us field through the research and pull out sort of these 4 aspects of how AI can support the K12 classroom. And so today we're talking about pillar 4, which is developing students as ethical and proficient users of AI. One of the things that is becoming clearer, and certainly in the districts that I've been talking with and schools that I've been talking with, and especially in different career workforce or community partners, that is being stressed is AI is increasingly becoming a part of the work world. Using AI, knowing when it's appropriate, when is it not appropriate, when to trust the results, when to not trust the results. So students need to start that kind of development process I would say at least in high school. And I would say technology use, understanding how technology works and using it is really like there's stages, like K12 is that. But as we're looking in high school to help support students in their next phase of their journey, whether that be post-secondary or career, AI is going to be a part of that process. So who do we want to be sending off to post-secondary and careers? And what is it they're going to need to know, understand, and do in regards to AI?
And I want to plug really quickly here. It'll be coming soon. But another one of the subcommittees that is part of the AI Commission is on workforce development. And they are about to release a skills report that talks about the different skills that you will need in the workforce in regards to AI. And they talk about it from different levels, from beginners to more advanced and proficient users of AI. So along with all of Leslie's subcommittee stuff, not Leslie's stuff, make sure that you look for that skills report, which again, hopefully it'll be out by the time this airs, but if not, will definitely be out very shortly. Yeah. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about a big question here. I think everybody can understand why students should be able to use AI effectively. Like you just said, they're going to be using it in the workforce. Why do they have to use it ethically? Why should that matter to us?
Well, I mean, I think I was thinking about this from our last episode. So there used to be when I was a programmer back in my engineering days, there used to be a saying like garbage in equals garbage out in terms of programming. Like the computer, the thing is doing what you tell it to do. So if your code is garbage or your code has an error in it, you're going to get an error coming out. I'm sorry. I had a flashback to when I had to chase down a calculation error that was happening, and I had put a minus sign on one line of code somewhere that it didn't need to be. And it took me days, but I had to go line by line. Sorry. Random tangent. You can cut that out if you need to. It was a flashback. It was PTSD from little T trauma of literally printing out my code and having to like go line by line and see where the error was happening. In AI, I would say data in equals data out. You're getting what the machine can make sense of based on the data that it has been provided. And so that has issues in a couple different ways. Is one, there's inherent bias. Where is it getting the data? Sometimes it's getting the data based on human decisions or human outcomes. And we are complex creatures that have our own biases, and that can get into the system in some way. You don't always know where it's getting its information from. And so how do I gain an idea of trust in terms of what information is being used, and is it appropriate for the use that I'm doing it? I know teachers are really concerned about quote unquote student teaching. I'm more concerned about students circumventing the learning process, right? It's a little twist on that idea of teaching, but if students can put something in AI and get a decent grade on it, but they haven't gone through and done the thoughtful research, the thoughtful thinking, the going through the stages of the process, the problem-solving stages, they're not developing their brains to think. They're not developing their brains to think like whatever type of career. Think like a writer, think like a mathematician, think like a scientist. And so over-reliance on AI can create where we're just propagating things that have already been done before, or we're just propagating other ideas and not really bringing in our own ideas. I also think about AI in the research process as we look at post-secondary institutions or research institutions. If we're over-relying on AI, we don't know if what we're getting is a hallucination, something that looks like it would be legit, but isn't coming from legit resources. If we take the AI's decision as gospel and we don't do any deeper thinking is that decision going to lead to outcomes, like dangerous outcomes or other consequences that we can't even rely on? So students need to develop an understanding, not just of how it's used, but how do I use it in my daily life or work life so that I'm getting the best results for what I need to get, but I'm doing it in a way that is ethical. I almost feel like there's a circular argument in there, but
No, I think it is circular, but in a good way. I think what you're saying is they're related. They're connected to each other. And it makes me think of two things. One is, so at the beginning, when I try to teach AI and I try to tell them how to use it. So when I try to do this, using it effectively and ethically lesson, I start by giving them some articles to read about people that got in trouble for using AI the wrong way. And one of them was a legal case where a lawyer, I think it was maybe the intern, maybe it wasn't the lawyer themselves, I can't remember now, but the lawyer had AI write a brief for it and turned it in to the court. And all of the cases that it made were hallucinations. Every single one was made up. And so they got caught pretty easily, and especially embarrassing, but also they did get into some actual trouble with it. And so we talk about those, about how but I think that goes to, if you teach them to be effective, you also have to teach them to be ethical, because they do go hand in hand. If you do just put in a prompt and say, hey, write this paper for me that I have to turn in, and just turn in what it wrote, you are not being effective or ethical.
Right. Yeah, you're just doing something like to get it done, but you're not going through and doing the check. Had somebody not think about the consequences of what could have happened to whatever the outcome of that trial was, if somebody didn't catch that, hey, these things don't look right? Because sometimes AI sounds really confident.
Yes.
And as humans, we're hardwired to notice the confidence and not always hardwired to do the deeper thinking and to kind of go and be like, hey, something doesn't feel right here. And let me explore or expand upon that and think about the consequences of what could have happened to the people involved in that trial. And that's the type of things that we want students. It goes beyond just turning in a paper that they didn't write. It goes beyond to, at some point, they might turn in a written document that has weight, that has consequence. And because they haven't done the thought, they haven't done the thinking, it's not representative of reality in any stretch of the imagination, but it sounds good and it goes through. We can have there could be some devastating consequences down the road. So I want students to use AI, but I don't want them to use it. I don't want anybody to use it in a way that will add harm to the world. Like, it should be a tool for good, and I will say not a tool for evil. It makes me sound like a superhero because like I'm Superman. I really want students to be able to walk away knowing how to use this to support their work, but also how to use it in a way that it leads to good outcomes, that leads to positive outcomes, and minimizes negative outcomes.
So in the field of rhetoric, I'm going way outside of AI really quickly. The philosophers will debate, is rhetoric, so the art of persuading others with your words, it a good or is it an evil? And the idea is, some philosophers will tell you, oh, it can be a good. Some will tell you it's an evil, because people should just know the facts and they should make their decisions based on the facts, and you shouldn't have to persuade them. But then there's a group that's in the middle that's like, rhetoric is a tool, and it depends on who you are. Are you good or are you evil? And that's the answer to the question.
Depends on your intent. Your intent. Right. Yeah, your intent to it.
I think that's what I hear you saying here, is that AI is the same thing. There's a debate, is AI evil? That's a common debate right now. And there's some people that say it's good, and there's some people that say it's evil. I think that I am in the middle. I am in the group of philosophers that say it is a tool. So it depends on if you are good or evil.
I almost feel like it's the combining of my engineering self and my yoga self. I like to do yoga when I can. So yoga has taught me intent. What is my intent with this routine? What is my intent as I go out into the world? And engineering is that practical reality, right? A lot of times I think people get frustrated with engineers because they aren't saying, well, it's definitely this or it's definitely that. Like, hey, under these circumstances, it can be this. Under these circumstances, it could be this. We're the middle of the road of the tech world, I like to think. So, and I will say we do sound confident sometimes, but generally I think in our head, we're like, yeah, it just depends on the system. And I just think that that's the way of AI. It depends on how you want to use it. It depends on how you're using it. And some of this stuff we're still developing. We're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like.
All right. So maybe let's transition into talking about different things that teachers can do to help create efficient and ethical users.
Well, I think the first thing is before a school or district, and I actually am thinking more in time, and I mean, I think it's a district conversation, but it can also be more in a microcosm of a school. I think the adults in the building need to get together, have a discussion of how do we see using AI ethically, both from an adult lens, but also from a student lens, right? Go ahead and have those conversations before you start using it with students. Even if it's not perfect, even if it's messy, even if it doesn't come up with all the constraints, have the conversation and be prepared to come back to that conversation in a reflection revision cycle. Maybe it's once a year, maybe it's twice a year, maybe the first time you're doing it, it's every 3 months. How are kids using it? What are we seeing the use? I just think we need to have those conversations first before it gets put into place with student and maybe even teacher use. And then from there, like kind of backwards math. If we think it's important that kids know how to use AI as part of a writing process, because I think that really in general is where I'm seeing a lot of the use of AI in my work, in the work just overall as part of a writing process. If we want students to be able to use it as part of a writing process, then backwards mapping that is I have to have a process in my classroom for students to write that both includes non-AI time and includes AI time. Okay? And so how are we going to ensure that? What is that going to look like in my classroom? Is it going to look like I'm going to have kids doing concept maps using pen and paper first, and then have them outline on a Google Doc, and then have them take the outline and do a first draft using AI? And then we take the AI draft and we do some peer editing or we do some self-editing and then revising of the work. Like maybe it's that. Maybe it's doing an initial lesson on developing your writer voice. Maybe our freshman kids need to have a PBL unit in their English classroom on developing yourself and developing your writing voice. And we get kids to fall in love with who they are as writers first. It can look differently, but if we want to say we don't want kids to use AI as the end result of the writing, then our teaching and learning processes need to change and shift in order to support that more process-oriented learning.
And kind of going along with this, we've talked about this in at least one other episode, maybe a couple, that if you could take your assignment and put it into some type of AI tool and get AI to give you the right answer or a very good answer, then maybe your assignment itself could be improved. So that might be a step 2, is to make sure that the students are getting assignments that they kind of need to use AI effectively and ethically, because they're not going to be able to just put it in and have it do the work for them.
I did, because in some ways I feel like the answer to pillar 4 is pillar 1, right? We're kind of going back in this circle is, yes, it is about changing the assignment, and inherent in that is changing the learning story. We call this many different things. We can say the learning process, the learning journey, the learning map, whatever we want to call it. Lately I've been playing around with the idea of, in PBL, project-based learning, when we go to write the map of student learning, in a sense, that's where we kind of go from like, here's where I'd launch it, and this is where I need to get kids to. How am I going to get them there, and how am I going to ensure learning takes place? But I actually want to think it more of like, what's the learning story that kids need to go through? What's the learning journey that they need to go through in order to do this thing that I'm asking them to do? So it's both changing that assignment that they're doing, but also changing the learning story, the learning journey that gets kids to that end result.
So I want to, first of all, I think that was a great answer. And then I also want to transition, and I need to figure out a way to make smoother transitions here. But I want to talk, we've been talking a lot about knowing that AI will do hallucinations, they'll make up information. So we've recognized that now, but we've been talking about it strictly from if I'm using AI, I need to research what I created because AI might be
fake stuff.
But there's also
good sounding fake stuff.
very good fake. I was going to say, when I was trying to put for one of our earlier episodes, I was trying to do some social around it. And I gave it the transcript and I said, can you give me a couple of really good pool quotes to put on some graphics? And it gave me these great quotes that I wish that one of us had said, but neither of us had said it. And so I said, okay, well, I mean, like, can you actually get one from the transcript? It needs to be directly from the transcript. That's not in there. You're absolutely right. I can't believe I did that. I understand your request now. I will give you a quote directly from the transcript. Here it is. Okay, that's also not from the transcript. Like, can you just use the transcript itself and give me? And then I did it like 2 or 3 times, and every time it would apologize, it recognize that it had made the mistake, and then say, this time it fixed it, and give me a fake quote. And so finally I said, can you not read the transcript? Like, is that the problem? Like, explain to me how I can make this easier for you. I sometimes talk to it like it is a person, but it was like, oh no, I understand your transcript. And it summed up the whole transcript and read it. And I was like, okay, then give me a quote from it.
The transcript. Yes. You have
finally,
to be specific.
Yeah. Finally, it did it. But if I had not been paying attention, I would have been doing all sorts of social on this, giving you credit for quotes that you had not said. So, but we know to check our own stuff. What I want to talk about now is the opposite. Is there any role in school to help students recognize when other people put AI out in the world that is not accurate?
So yeah, I absolutely think I think the opportunity here is that I think we're calling it critical media literacy. I mean, we've needed to do this before AI. Before AI, it's how do we recognize the validity of a source? And critically thinking about the information in the source, where can I go in order to find that information? AI is just now like taking that up to a different level. I'm having to have conversations with my mom about, no, Mom, that's AI. And then she was like, but I don't understand how. I was thinking about the ones that have come out now where you have somebody on stage for America's Got Talent and they turn into, like, I don't know, a chicken, a unicorn, what have you. And I've had to explain to her that's not happening in real time. She's like, I understand it's AI, but how do they film it in real time? I'm like, no, the whole thing, the whole video is AI. So, and now these AI systems, right, that could create videos and pictures are getting a lot more photorealistic. And so how do you have sort of almost a skeptical eye, a skeptic's eye, as you're looking at any media resource now? I mean, it is almost going to get to the point where you've got to maybe even train kids to go and look at the references and look up the references to make sure that, one, it's a valid reference, and two, the reference is coming to the conclusions that the report says it is. So it's just going to up a certain level of literary criticism that we're going to have to train kids on, that we may not have had to train them on quite as in-depthly as we kind of go into the sort of new generation. And we almost really just going to, every time, I feel like I'm starting to do this with my life, right? Is everything that I see, I'm always looking for, is this, I'm looking for the words not matching the mouth. I'm looking for, do the hands look real? Are they showing me hands? I'm always having to look for, is this a legitimate video? Is this a legitimate article? Where in the past we're used to, say, trusting our news sources as unbiased, or trusting a report as, we haven't had to go back and look at the references to see, is this accurate? So, but students are going to need to do that as we kind of come in to make sure that the information that they're getting is the most correct information.
I will say, I feel like English teachers out there are in a better place because there's a lot of pedagogy and around teaching, specifically composition, I'm sure literature as well, on already before AI was even a thing, teaching students to be skeptics and to question everything. And so assuming that they were already kind of following that, there's obviously other
To add to it, right?
But yeah, and so like at least we have that to where a lot of us anyway have already been told, create skeptics, make your students skeptical of everything. But hopefully the other teachers will give it.
But we might need to add to that in a science classroom where we're reading technical reports. How do we know that the information in a technical report is legitimate? How does a scientist read a technical journal article, a scientific journal article, so that they're getting information in that they need in order to go to the next step in the research process? So it's not just reading. News is going to be an important one. Video is going to be an important one. But I do think this provides this opportunity. This is why in science class, we need kids reading scientific journals so that they get an idea of what one looks like, how it looks, as a way to have that scientific questioning when I look at or read any type of scientific information. In our career tech ed classes, we need to look at what's the media that students are going to be referencing, creating, doing, and how do we make sure that the information that we're getting, that we're seeing, is legitimate.
And so media literacy, that's one issue that we should be thinking about in our classes. Here's another one that is probably the most common thing that I've heard, and you might say the same, maybe you've heard something different. I'm going to talk a little bit about plagiarism. So I want to start by pointing out that I'm also on the AI Commission, so I've gone to all the AI Commission meetings, and I think that one thing our speakers have pointed out many, many, many times in all our meetings is that plagiarism is not new. Every study that has been done says students cheat, and students cheated before AI, and they're going to keep cheating after AI. So when we talk about this, I know that's the number one thing I hear is like students are going to use AI to plagiarize. They're going to use AI to cheat. And it's like, okay, well, they're going to do it anyway. So let's stop them from this way. But it's not a new worry is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Worry. And so I want to talk about, is there anything that we can do, that schools can do to try to prevent AI misuse like cheating?
So I think the easiest start is to question, why are the students resorting to that? And to really think about, is it that they're being lazy and they just want to get it done and then they can get it done and then go off to other things? That might be one answer. Is it that they don't have confidence in their writing ability? And so the words that they're reading on, like before AI, if they're citing text or words, those words sound a lot better than the words that I would write because I'm still learning how to write. So are they doing it because they aren't confident in their opinion, their voice, and what they have to say? There's going to be some truth to that. So how do we support kids in order to be able to use information in text, but to paraphrase it, to then add to it with our own voice, our own thinking? Is it because students don't know how to cite properly, to give credit, and so and within the body of the document? All of those ways are true and require different strategies in order to overcome. So I think that's start by asking that question and then thinking about, all right, if this is true, what's the strategy that I'm going to employ in my classroom that will help the students overcome that?
And I think also, I don't know about everybody, this is going to be very anecdotal here, but traditionally, the students that I've caught cheating, I'm not saying these are the only students that cheated, just the ones that I've caught. I almost always caught it because I recognize that that's not their voice, because I've seen enough of their work to realize, wait, this is like the one time I had twins in my class, and I wasn't able to prove this, but I'm confident that they took turns. The stronger writer would write for his brother sometimes to keep his brother's grade up, because it would sound like they would sound like two individual people, and then every once in a while they would sound like each other. And so, but you recognize their voices, and I think that's something, if you know your students well and their work, when they turn in the one that they're more like an essay, which they're more likely to, they don't want to take the time to write a full essay, so they get AI to write it, or whatever their reason is. They might be, they don't understand it. I don't want to accuse them of just, they didn't want to take it. They didn't want to write it. But anyway, I'll recognize that more because I know them and I know their normal work. And I think if you know you're doing that in the class, you have maybe in-class writing assignments that they can't use AI on, and you recognize the way they write and their style and their voice and their tone. That's a composition thing, but I'm sure there's similar equivalents in other subjects.
Yes. Well, but then back up. Why do you think that one student is resorting to having their twin write it for them?
I don't know, because I technically don't know that happened. That's just my theory.
Yeah. But if it did, why are they resorting to that, right? If you had a student who's doing that, why are they resorting to that?
One of the twins was, again, this is all my personal opinion, but one of the twins was definitely a stronger writer than the other. And he was definitely going to be the one getting the A in the class, whereas the other student, he was fine. He wasn't going to fail or anything, but he was going to get a B or a C. And I think that probably there's something in his life. He's the better math student, let's say. Then he'll help his brother with his math homework, and then they'll both get an A in math. And then in English, the other one, and they'll both get an A in English because they're doing just enough, writing it every once in a while just to pull his grade up enough that he keeps it in the range that he wants it in.
That's starting with an unconfident. I am unconfident in my real writing ability. My brother or my sister is better at it than I am, so why not get them to write it or help me write it? And then it becomes their voice, not my voice. But I'm not good at it. So that's where, as a teacher, I might have to go back and say, how do I develop this student's confidence? Or how do I revalidate that I want their thinking and their words, and not just, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? I'm looking for what they're thinking. And that may even come to how we grade or what we're looking at as part of the grading process and what we're giving feedback to. So that's what I mean by, let's start at the root of the problem and then go there. I know my daughter, I'm going to call her out, last year resorted to using AI for a class because the teacher, the questions that the teacher was asking were not answered by the resources that she was given to answer them with. And so there was a mix match between here's the text and the questions being asked. And the teacher didn't give any scaffolding to how, or be able to say, I want you to go from this text, and then we're going to pull out the textual information, and then we're going to do something that helps you answer more complex questions. But these were factually based questions that weren't answered by the text, the facts that they were given. So she resorted to using AI and Google in order to answer them because she had to just get it done. So there's a mismatch between the resources that I'm giving my kids and what I'm asking them to do with that. So we have to make sure, even in our classrooms, that we're aligning all the steps. And sometimes it happens because we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, we're just trying to pull something in, and teenagers, as much as they will probably want to call out sometimes a mistake in what you're wearing or something that you say, they are very shy about calling out teachers in terms of an assignment that doesn't make sense. because that's a little bit more vulnerable.
Well, that actually leads me really nicely into my next question, because what I'm hearing you say is part of this ethics discussion is about finding out why students are doing any cheating or plagiarizing that they're doing. And my next question is about the idea of creating ethics committees in schools that are either student led or student involved. And so tell me your thoughts about that.
That was actually that was an idea that came out directly out of some discussions in our committee work. And I really just liked that idea. I'm always liking students to be a part of the process that they are going to be judged by. So just like we want adults in the building to have conversations about what does ethical mean and look like in our classrooms, we also need to invite students into those conversations. And by inviting them into the conversation, we're also helping them, empowering them to police the process, to make sure that the more that we engage kids and give them a voice in the process, the more that they're going to have ownership of that process, and the more that they will head to head with a peer about that, hey, you need to be using this the correct way because this is why we said. So somebody came out with the idea of having these student-led AI ethics committees where they are looking at their own work and having those conversations almost as a way of training them, training their brains, training their thinking to be able to do this beyond their life in K-12 education.
All right. So this leads me into my very last question, because we're almost done for the day. And I want to end like I've ended every episode so far, which is it's the first week back of school. We're planning, or even before the first week of school, and we're planning our lessons for the year. What's the first step that we can do to kind of engage with Pillar 4?
Yeah. Well, I think the first step is going back to what we talked about before, is have those conversations at your school of what does ethics and AI look like, sound like, feel like in our context. That could be microcosm as a school. It might be by discipline, but you need to have those conversations, that we can't just hide it and because it's messy and complex. And so we don't want to have those conversations. No, you need to have them. It's not going to be perfect. So set up ways that you're going to revise your ethical stance or your policy. And it's not just going to be a one and done policy.
I want to say, sorry, before you finish, I just wanted to add there that I think that's really important, because I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for students when they go from class to class. And if one teacher is like, use AI for anything. And then one's like, use it, but use it correctly. And another's like, if you even think about AI in this classroom, it's an automatic F. It's like so confusing for them. So I would think getting on the same page with your school or your department or whatever it is would be very useful.
Yeah. And how do we communicate that to students without undermining their confidence? And I think second to that is look at Pillar 1. If you're going to embed AI in your classroom, how are you going to embed it so students are learning how to use it ethically within whatever process that they need to learn it in and effectively? And so it might mean going back and kind of relooking at your units of study or lesson plans and say, oh, this is what I can do here, and this is how I'm going to use AI in this situation. So it is maybe going back and rethinking the learning journey of your students and where might you put AI that makes the most sense for training students or developing students on how to use it.
All right. Well, thank you again, Leslie. This has been great. So I do want to say next week is our Making Schools Work conference. We're going to be in New Orleans, and I know
New Orleans.
New Orleans in July. I'm told it's lovely.
If you listen to this, come to the PBL playground. Come see us do different aspects of project-based learning.
But I do want to say, so like I said early in this episode, we are going to be announcing all sorts of changes to the podcast that are very exciting. And as part of this launch of the new era, our podcast 2.0, we are going to do at the conference a full week of episodes where we're going to release an episode every day. And we are going to release a bonus AI episode as part of this series with you during that week of episodes. And we're going to talk about the checklist that you created that helps schools vet and find and implement and review AI tools in the school. So thank you for agreeing to be part of our week of episodes. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with you again to talk about the checklist. And I will see you in New Orleans.
All right. See you in New Orleans. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of Class Act Coaching, brought to you by the Southern Regional Education Board. SREB is a nonprofit dedicated to improving education from pre-K all the way to PhD and into the workforce. Visit SREB.org for resources on instructional practices, teacher data, career pathways, and more. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook at SREB-School Improvement and on Twitter/X and Instagram, both at SREB Education. See you next week.